With Project Holodeck, we wanted to develop something where we could add all of those elements in, and then we started to build different pieces of content from that, and raw data essentially came out of all of those experiments that we used to do back at college.
And so we were like, wow, we could actually create this kind of crazy Frankenstein monster of a device, you know, this combination of all these different motion tracking and immersive technologies to build what then became Project Holodeck. And this is where Alex Silkin came in to make all of this amazing stuff work. I mean, Alex built, you know, the earliest form of interaction architecture that I'm aware of.
So Project Holodeck is where it all began. That is the birthplace of Survios. That is when all the co-founders met. From the beginning, we were trying to make multiplayer experiences or cooperative experiences. So the very first game that we tackled was this game called Wild Skies. Potentially maybe the three pillars of Survios. It's these immersive worlds that have believable characters and have an interesting narrative and world that you want to experience, but you're experiencing with someone else. And at the same time, it's just really rich, exhilarating gameplay.
Raw data grew very organically. We had finished Project Holodeck, we had started Survios, so we were known for Zombies on the Holodeck, which was kind of our breakout tech demo, if you want to say that.
You know, we wanted to take our Project Holodeck system, we wanted to create a really immersive experience for it. And I personally wanted to figure out what it might be like to feel like you're living inside of like a classic Hollywood horror film.
Everyone was blown away when they first saw it. It was that much of a good experience because the Vive wasn't out yet. So really it was not only the first time you could try room scale VR, but then you have this incredibly like realistic and terrifying zombie game that you're playing as your first time really in room scale VR. So it was very mind blowing. And so we switched over to Unreal and we started experimenting and building interaction systems and kind of small things we always wanted to build, new weapons, new items, and that early experimentation led us to an early title that was called Bullet Time Apex, and this was kind of our like action movie fantasy title, and really that was the title that you could say incubated raw data.
Originally Bullet Time Apex was made to support and work on a Linux-based operating system, so a multiplayer first-person VR shooter on a Linux hadn't been done before, and so there was a lot of technical challenges that we had to deal with in that scenario.
I think a lot of it, so we initially built out this very, massive level, a bunch of linear corridors. It's a very different type of game, and we didn't actually have the manpower to art it up the same way that we can now. So I was just trying to be smart with making things look very interesting from a shape perspective, and keeping material simple, and mostly letting lighting do the work.
It was a game where we had full locomotion, which we have now, but for the longest time in VR community was considered you don't want to have locomotion. Take it out, it's going to make people sick. We decided to try it anyway. So it was a full mission scenario where you had to infiltrate a building, you had to, you steal an object, fight off enemies. When I first joined, we still weren't quite sure how we were going to do it. We didn't know how to handle the interactions, how to handle the combat. We did a lot of really fun things. We played around with fully simulating the character.
A lot of the challenges for reading a character for VR for us was depending on what we were going to actually display. At first, it was a full body display. You could see all of your arms, you could see everything. That made it a little more challenging because we had to always remove the head. Then we had to decide if we were going to show the full arms or not.
Because once you're designing weapons for VR, it almost becomes more like real-life product design, right? Ergonomics becomes important in terms of how it feels to hold this weapon in your hand. How much of the weapon actually gets in the way as you're looking down the sights. Do you have a stock, for example?
And for sake of having only 3 artists working at the time, 4 artists working on the project, we went with a very clean, i.e., no textures, look to everything. But that required the lighting to be very judiciously placed. Because if you have no textures and everything's kind of shiny and everything's kind of flat, it's really easy for low-resolution light maps or not enough lights or too many reflections or whatnot to really show up everywhere.
There's a lot of things that are in there that I don't think a lot of people have gotten to see and touch. So just transformable weapons, all kinds of little things. I don't want to talk too much about it because people might get too excited to hear some of this stuff. But for the most part, most everything that we've been working on since we did raw data has made it into the game.
Yeah, so the look and feel of the game did evolve quite a bit throughout production. In the beginning, we had more of kind of a cyber James Bond kind of feeling. We had like men in suits infiltrating what was still Eden Corp at the time. But then, as the gameplay, we discovered that we wanted to push more towards class-based gameplay. It made sense to differentiate the design of the characters a lot more from each other. So moving away from like four guys in suits, and then giving each character a little bit more of just visual identity in terms of their character design and their backstory.
And as well as there were key aspects of we are attempting to nail multiple kinds of gameplay and pacing with the level that not all of them really hit. And so we needed to step back and assess what would we take from this experience, what are the best parts, and where can we actually convert this into something that we can ship.
The best thing about working on Bullet Time was being able to test all of these things in something that was in-house, and we could just fail over and over and over again until we found the right thing. And I think a lot of everything that was good got ported over into raw data.
And as it came time to build that into a title that we could ship, it kind of went through a bit of a metamorphosis, so to speak, especially as not only James was working on it, but then Mike McTire came on as well. And basically there was this evolution where it turned into raw data through a number of new creative art, mechanics, engineering, all sorts of different things. Basically to get that title into a state that we could ship it to prime time, it had to evolve into raw data.